Hi, y'all. It's me, Faye, again. And tonight I'm going to talk about the situation in Minneapolis. And I think many of you have already realized that this situation is totally out of control and that something has to be done about it. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I spoke about when Renee Good had been shot and killed by ICE agents. And tonight, unfortunately, I'm going to have to talk about a man by the name of Alex Pretti. Um, Unfortunately, Mr. Pretti had the unfortunate, uh, I don't know how to explain it, of coming across the path of ICE. And so if I keep looking to the side, you got to excuse me because I wanted to make sure I was correct and I covered everything. So, of course, I have some notes here. Um, Most of you also know that I am the owner and the operator of a private investigation and security agency. And one of the areas that we do look at is human rights violations, civil rights violations, and of course, police procedures. With that said, I always like to tell people this, people laugh at investigators. They have this kind of image of us, Magnum PI and all of that. But they fail to realize that some of us, most of us, are very serious in our profession. And I like to remind people that as smart as Perry Mason was, he never won a case without Paul Drake. Uh, the situation with Alex Pretti has many troubling aspects, and part of that troubling aspect is the way that the story was first presented to the public. Initially, we were told that Mr. Pretti had gone to a demonstration and that he approached ICE agents waving a firearm and threatening the lives of the agents, and they had no option but to shoot him. Uh, that narrative proved to be untrue. And I have to say in the beginning that I haven't, even though I've worked a case out of Minneapolis that involved a criminal defense case up there, that was a while ago. And I also do not have the current, that involved Minneapolis Police Department. That didn't involve federal agents. But what I would say is that I do not have a copy of ICE's what we call use of force SOP or their procedures or their guidelines. I also don't have a copy of their deadly force SOP and operating procedures. So there are some things that are so standard in policing that you really don't need to see each department's SOP because they're pretty much the same. The federal standards for use of deadly force and the federal standards for use of force, they are two different standards, are the same for all federal law enforcement. And somehow somebody has convinced ICE that they have blanket qualified immunity and they can't be held accountable for their actions. I will correct that right now because you can ask any attorney. You only have qualified immunity when you're acting within the scope of your job. And there are some serious questions here. ICE initially said that Mr. Pretti, as I said, was participating in a demonstration, that he was armed and he was waving a weapon around. We have found that to be untrue. First of all, there was no demonstration. ICE was trying to get a person into a car, and at least two women showed up, and they were in the street blowing a whistle, and I think at some point they were screaming that ICE was on the location. Mr. Pretti was on the opposite side of the street, and he was filming using a cell phone. At some point, Mr. Pretti did step into the street and continue to film, but he remained what we call left of center, which means that he was still on the opposite side of the street from the ICE agents, and he never had, from what we can see, he never had any contact with them. At some point, one of the ICE agents came over and shoved one of the women. That in itself is questionable to me, because I don't understand how you shove someone, but you never attempt to put handcuffs on them. So they shoved this woman, they pepper sprayed her, and she went down towards the ground. At that point, Mr. Pretti appeared to try to help her to get up, when several other ICE agents came over and began to struggle with Mr. Pretti. From the looks of it, at one point you see, when it was just he and one agent, you see him backing up with the camera in one hand and his other hand raised. At no time do you see a weapon in his hand. They grabbed Mr. Pretti from the sidewalk and brought him back into the street. It's unclear why, when he was in an upright position, if they were intent upon arresting him, somebody just didn't put a pair of cuffs on him and walk him back across the street. Mr. Pretti was taken to the ground. Well, he was first pepper sprayed. Then he was taken to the ground where there was I don't know, to me, I'm just going to be honest, it looked like a pack of mad dogs that were on him. And one officer was at the front towards his head and appeared to be striking him with a tear gas canister. Then, as many people saw in the video, another officer appears and appears to reach into some part of Mr. Pretti's clothing, and he then stands up with a weapon in his hand and walks away. Shortly after he walked away, someone hollered "gun" 3 times, and then someone shot Mr. Pretti. It was a couple of rounds, and then it was a pause. Everyone scattered. And see, what I have trouble with is, why were they shooting him when there were other officers, as we would say, in the line of fire? But anyway, those officers backed up, and then there was what could be described as a second round of shots. These shots, as most people saw, were fired as Mr. Pretti laid on the ground. So, the whole thing is troubling because of, I think you would say, the lack of what you would expect from law enforcement officers, and the lack of what you would see normally with law enforcement officers. I have worked an incident where an officer that was under my supervision had shot and killed a civilian. And your first duty at that point is to secure the officer, separate him from the other officers, to secure his weapon and any other weapon that was used in it. But this doesn't appear to happen. It's troubling because a man has lost his life, and most people who see this video, because some of the videos aren't what you call blacked out, so you actually see them shooting him, they're troubled by it. And there are a lot of questions. And the main question is, why was the initial narrative that Mr. Pretti had showed up waving a gun at a demonstration? And there is absolutely no video evidence to support it. And in fact, all the evidence seems to support that Mr. Pretti was on the other side of the street. And at no time did he cross into even that section where the ICE agents were. He remained over there. There is nothing to indicate he even had any type of conversation with them. ICE is a problem, and they are a problem because, as I've said in previous videos, ICE does not act like a law enforcement agency. They act like a bunch of, I don't know what, running around. They claim they have good training. They claim that the person that shot Renee Good was actually a firearms instructor. And the other thing that's troubling, as in that case, after he shot her, he called her a effing B, and just kind of casually walked away. Nobody rendered aid. There was nobody saying we need to secure this crime scene. He just kind of dusted off his weapon and walked away. In this case, what makes it even worse than when they shot Renee Good is that if you look at some of the videos, you will see this officer who actually is clapping. Now, I don't know if they believe that what they do, there is no accountability for it and they cannot be held accountable. Qualified immunity is not given to you by an individual. It comes to you with the job. So when somebody tells you you have qualified immunity, unless they can show you in a document where the rule has changed, you don't have it. And if you believe that these ICE agents believe that they will not be held accountable, then they are in Minneapolis. And all they have to do is look at Chauvin, who is now doing about 20 years in a federal prison, in addition to the fact that 3 of the other officers that were with him were also held accountable. And their agency was held financially responsible to George Floyd's family. Now, I realize that there is a problem with immigration, but that problem is only being made worse by this situation. And as many of us are finding out, I also travel. I've seen police departments all over the world. But here's one thing that bothers me, is that we are losing our credibility. And there was an incident, I think most of you saw it many of you might have saw it at a hotel where ICE was supposedly staying, and these people went to the hotel and they were trying to get in and they were pushing things and and it was wrong. Don't dispute the fact it was wrong. But what really bothered me was that one of the ICE people was saying, one of the federal people was saying, where is the Minneapolis Police Department? Minneapolis is like every other city. It has a limited police department. It has, from what I understand, 600 police officers in a population of maybe 250,000 people. They still have 911 calls to answer. They still have traffic accidents to work. They still have other emergency calls that they have to deal with. ICE has 3,000 people on the ground. They should be able to police themselves. So what I am saying here is that in the Pretti case, there is so much out there that indicates that they were wrong as 2 left shoes, and no matter how anybody tries to walk it back and say, well, we now need an investigation, we now need this, we now need that, it is not going to help them. And as one of my training instructors told me 40 years ago, ooh, that's a long time, but 40 years ago, he told my recruit class, he said, remember this, truthfulness is the only offense for which there is no progressive discipline, and you can be fired immediately, because when a department, or in this case an agency, loses its credibility with the people, they're done. ICE is done, because we saw what we saw. I saw what I saw. And, because I am trained, I do look at it many times differently than most people do. But there is nothing that I saw that justified the shooting of Mr. Pretti. There is also nothing that should allow the head of Homeland Security, the head of ICE, the head of Border Patrol, those people who are in the federal positions, who stood up and perpetuated what they knew was a barefaced lie, for them to continue to function. They need to revamp ICE. In fact, they need to take it back to its mission, Border Patrol isn't even supposed to be, I think, more than 100 miles from the border. There's no border in Minneapolis. And lastly, I will remind them what has been said by the governor, what has been said by the mayor, and what has been said by the police chief. It is different policing a civilian population. What they do at the border, you can't do against civilians. So that's my rant for the day. And as I said, I am going to continue to look at this, and I'm going to continue it for the people that work for me. We are looking at it as a training exercise because we are just saying this makes no sense. So anyway, be peaceful, be calm. ICE has now moved into the city where I am. So, well, not the city, but the metropolitan area that I'm in. And we have been waiting and preparing for them, and we'll see what happens. So anyway, I always forget to tell you, subscribe, like, comment, say whatever you've got to say, and I will respond. So everybody have a good evening.